The call came through on a Tuesday, which was the kind of detail Morgan Ziegler would remember for the rest of his life. Not because it was significant, just because he had been eating a gas station burrito at the time, standing in the parking lot of a Chevron off Route 1, watching a pelican try to steal a man's French fries, and thinking about how he had completely and thoroughly failed at every single thing he had ever attempted, when the sky opened up and two figures fell out of it. That was the beginning. Everything else, the transformation, the queen, the war, came after. But the beginning was a parking lot, a burrito, and the certainty that nothing in his life would ever amount to much. He was wrong about that last part. The ship that punched through the cloud cover and crash-landed in the parking lot was not large by the standards of interstellar travel. It was, in fact, barely larger than a school bus, oblong, feathered in heat-scared ceramic plating, trailing a comet tail of smoke from a port thruster that had been very recently shot off. It hit the asphalt with a sound like a freight train hitting a piano and slid 40 feet before grinding to a stop against the Chevron's ice machine. Morgan stood very still. The Pelican had already left. The hatch blew open. Two figures stumbled out. The first was a woman, young, maybe his age, dressed in something that looked like it was assembled from starlight and bad decisions, a glowing amulet at her throat. The second was a bird, an actual bird, 4 feet tall, wearing a vest, carrying what appeared to be a leather satchel. He had the expression of someone who had made a series of increasingly confident choices and was now arriving at the destination those choices led to. "You," the bird said, pointing at Morgan with a wing. "Are you trustworthy?" Morgan looked behind him. There was no one else. "Statistically? Not historically," he said. The bird looked at the woman. The woman looked at Morgan. Something passed between the two of them, a conversation conducted entirely in raised eyebrows and exhaustion. And then the bird opened his satchel. "We'll take it," the bird said. The serum hit him like swallowing a thunderstorm. He texted his friends first, because some habits survived the end of the world, and Dave and George arrived 12 minutes later to find Morgan sitting on the curb looking at his hands, which were green. "You look awful," Dave said. "I feel incredible," Morgan said. "I feel like I could flip a car." "Can you flip a car?" Morgan stood up, walked to the nearest car, a Buick Skylark belonging to a man named Gerald who was inside buying lottery tickets, and flipped it. "Oh," Dave said. By nightfall, all three of them had been sprayed. Morgan became Zitz. George, who was large and good-natured and moved through the world with the density of a man who had never once hurried, became Pimple. Dave, nervous, fast-talking, with hands that were always moving, became Rash. The names were old, Professor T. Bird explained this in the careful, slightly apologetic tone of someone delivering a lot of information quickly. The Battletoads had existed before. They had protected Princess Angelica's bloodline for 3 generations. They had been lost. The genetic essence of the original warriors had been preserved. The essence was the serum, and now the 3 of them were what came next. "You chose us because we were nearby?" Morgan asked. "I chose you because your pattern-reading scores in your school's computer system suggested high adaptive intelligence," T-Bird said. He paused. "And because you were nearby. What are we protecting her from, exactly?" T-Bird's beak pressed thin. "The Dark Queen," he said. "Her name is Serenthix. She rules a territory that spans 4-star systems. She has been hunting Angelica for 3 years. She wants the amulet. It contains the encoded location of a weapons archive from the old empire. If she acquires it, there is no military force in this sector capable of stopping her." Morgan looked at Dave. Dave looked at George. George was eating a gas station burrito he had found on the ground, looking unbothered. "What happens to Earth if she takes the amulet?" Morgan asked. T-Bird was quiet for a moment. "According to the Queen," he said carefully, "Earth is too backward and insignificant for her to bother conquering." "That's almost offensive," Dave said. "She'll leave you alone," T-Bird said, "until she doesn't need to anymore." Morgan thought about that. He thought about the Pelican. He thought about the burrito. He thought about the parking lot and the Buick and Gerald, who was probably very upset about his car. He thought about the way his whole life had felt like being almost good enough at things that mattered to almost no one. "Okay," he said. "What do we do?" The answer to that question turned out to be a lot. The Dark Queen's advance units were already on Earth. They had arrived 2 hours before the ship came down. Scouts embedded in the local area, wearing bodies that were close enough to human to walk through a crowd but wrong in ways you felt before you saw. The joints that moved a half second too late. The eyes that blinked at the wrong frequency. The way they stood in a line at the convenience store counter, and each one ordered exactly the same thing. The first fight happened in a diner. It was not a good fight by any measurement. Morgan had spent 0 hours of his life training to use a body that could transform its limbs into weapons. The smash hits, that was T. Bird's term, delivered with a straight face that suggested he had not chosen the name and was committed to it anyway, required a kind of focused intention he hadn't quite located yet. He knew, in the abstract, that he could extend his fist to the size of a wrecking ball. The execution was more complicated. He tried it for the first time when one of the Queen's scouts shoved a waitress out of the way, and the waitress spilled hot coffee down her own arm and said something very specific under her breath. Something about being tired, about always being tired. The way she said it, flat, past anger, just exhausted, connected to something in Morgan's chest that was also tired of certain things. His fist expanded. It did not go in the direction he intended. It went mostly left. It removed a significant section of the diner's counter, 2 bar stools, and a pie display before it connected with the scout's torso and sent him through the plate glass window into the parking lot. The waitress stared. Morgan looked at his hand. "Sorry," he said, to the diner, to her, to the general concept of property damage. "Don't be," she said. "Dave and George were doing better." Dave's speed, which had always made him seem skittish in human form, translated into something genuinely alarming in toad form. He was everywhere, and then he was somewhere else, and the scouts couldn't track him. George was simply large and methodical. He picked up the scouts and put them down. He was not enjoying it exactly, but he was competent at it, which was a new experience for him. By the time it was over, the 3 of them were standing in a ring of damaged furniture and unconscious alien shock troops, breathing hard, looking at each other. "We did that," George said. "We did part of that," Dave said. "The part where the counter fell on me was them. Are you hurt?" Counterintuitively, no. Morgan looked at his hands again. They were back to normal size. Still green. Probably always going to be green now, he thought. He found he didn't mind that as much as he expected to. The problem, the larger problem, the one that Bird laid out in the car while they drove nowhere in particular, and Angelica sat in the back seat looking at her amulet with the expression of someone who has carried a weight so long they've forgotten what their shoulders felt like empty, was that the scout incursion was a test. The Queen wanted to know what kind of protection the princess had before she moved her main assets into position. "She has a cruiser in high orbit, Bird said, studying a readout on a device that looked like a compass crossed with a small fire. "Armed. Troop complement. Significant." "How significant?" Morgan asked. "More than 3, Bird said. "Great. There is a facility," Bird said, "on the edge of the city, an old aerospace building, decommissioned. I landed there briefly when we first arrived. The building's shielding is thick enough to mask Angelica's amulet from the Queen's sensors. If we can get there and hold it until I can establish a transmission to the nearest Allied patrol." "How long for the patrol to arrive?" 12 hours. Approximately. "And the Queen will what during those 12 hours? Bird made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a chirp. "Try very hard to kill you," he said. It was Angelica who spoke then. She had been quiet for most of the conversation. Watchful, contained, the kind of quiet that wasn't absence but attention. She was looking at the 3 of them with something Morgan couldn't quite name. It wasn't gratitude. It was more complicated than that. "You don't have to do this," she said. "You didn't ask for any of it. The serum. Bird should have asked first. You had lives. You could walk away." "Walk away to what?" George said, not unkindly. "To normal," she said. "There's a reversal. Bird has it. You could be human again by morning." The 3 of them were quiet for a moment. Morgan thought about the parking lot, the burrito, all the near misses and almost enoughs. "Your amulet," he said, "the weapons archive it leads to. If the Queen gets it, she wins a war that's been ongoing for 20 years. 3 civilizations go dark. Earth," she stopped. "Earth eventually," Morgan said. "Yes." Morgan looked at Dave. Dave was already shaking his head no. George was eating something. Morgan didn't know where he kept getting food. "We're not walking away," Morgan said. "You don't know what she is," Angelica said. "Tell me," she told him. "The Dark Queen." Cyrenthics, which in the old dialect meant something close to the beautiful inevitable, had been human. Once. This was the part of the story that most people didn't know, Bird explained, because she had spent considerable effort removing it from every archive she could reach. She had been a xenobiologist from a colony world, young and brilliant, who had made a discovery about the nature of biological adaptation that the established powers of her era found threatening. They had imprisoned her. She had escaped. She had, over the course of a decade that the history books described with words like atrocity and consolidation, built herself into something that used human as a blueprint, the way a house fire uses wood. She was still brilliant. She was also completely serious about all of it, the conquest, the amulet, the weapons archive. She didn't want power for its own sake. She wanted it because she had a plan, and the plan required resources, and the resources required power. And somewhere along the way, she had stopped distinguishing between the plan and herself. She's not wrong about everything she wants, Angelica said, and there was pain in it. The archive, the weapons inside it, they could end the war, her war, all the wars, but not the way she'd use them. How does she plan to use them? To make sure no one can ever threaten her again. Morgan sat with that, the queen who had been human, who had been afraid, who had turned fear into a weapon and the weapon into a worldview. She's going to come herself, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, T-Bird said, she will. The facility was 3 miles away. They moved on foot through the industrial outskirts of a city that didn't know anything was happening, which was both reassuring and slightly insulting. The streets were ordinary in the way that streets are ordinary when the world is ending elsewhere, sir. Morgan walked next to Angelica. She was carrying the amulet in one hand now, not wearing it, turning it over in her fingers. It caught streetlight and scattered it in colors that had no names. Does it actually feel like anything? He asked. Carrying it. Like responsibility, she said. Which feels like weight, mostly. You've been running for 3 years.
Yes.
Yes. How do you not just give up? Yeah, she looked at the amulet. Because if I give it to her, she doesn't just win. She wins and then she builds something worse than what she replaced, and I'd know I handed her the tools to do it. She paused. Also, Bird would be insufferable about it. From somewhere behind them, T-Bird said, I heard that. They reached the facility. It was the kind of building that had been built to last, and then forgotten. Good bones, bad skin, windows missing in rows, a parking structure on one side that had slowly become a habitat for pigeons, and a complicated water stain shaped like the state of Wyoming. T-Bird disabled the security systems with the device that looked like a compass. They went inside. The first wave came 90 minutes later. It came through 3 points simultaneously, which meant the Queen's tactical people had been watching and had mapped the building. Morgan noticed this because the timing was too clean. No fumbling, no adaptation, just pressure applied at the exact angles that would maximize stress. Whoever was running the assault was good. He posted Dave at the east entry, George at the service bay that opened onto the lower level, and took the main corridor himself. Angelica and Bird were in the center of the building, in a room that still had intact walls on all sides, behind 2 locked doors. The scouts he had fought in the diner were lower grade. These were different. Heavier, faster, with carapaces that absorbed the first 2 hits before they started to crack. Morgan found himself retreating, and then he found something else. The room where he was retreating was narrowing, and there were 3 of them, and they were channeling him toward a corner. He stopped retreating. There's a thing that happens, sometimes, in the lives of people who've spent a long time being smaller than whatever they were fighting. Not physically, but in the sense of consequence, of stakes, of whether it mattered. The thing is a kind of clarity, a settling. Morgan felt it come down over him like a change in weather. He had been afraid of using the smash hits because he couldn't control them. He had been trying to aim them, to be precise, which was how he'd destroyed the diner counter. He stopped trying to aim. He let the thing move through him and put itself where it wanted to go, and the fist that came out the other side was the size of a refrigerator, and it went exactly where it needed to go, and the 3 soldiers went backwards through a wall. He stood in the hole the wall had left. He was breathing hard. He was also, he realized, smiling. In the service bay, George was working. He was not a complicated fighter. He found things and he put them down, and when they tried to get up, he put them down again. There was a rhythm to it that he found oddly peaceful. His mother had always told him that the best use of a large body was helping people move furniture. She had been mostly right. This was a limited extension of the same principle. Dave was less peaceful and more mathematical. He counted the entries, he counted the exits, and he moved in the space between those 2 numbers, like a variable that refused to be solved. 3 soldiers lost him in the dark of the east corridor and spent 6 minutes fighting each other before they realized what had happened. He never found this funny. It was just logistics. The first wave broke after 40 minutes. The building was quiet. The three of them convened in the hall, outside Angelica's room. They were variously dinged and scorched, and in George's case, missing a piece of his left ear that had been removed by something sharp. He didn't seem to notice. Second wave? Dave said. Third T, Bird said through the door. The second wave is psychological. What's the second wave? The building's communication system. Ancient analog, running on wiring that predated the smartphones of the people inside the building, produced a sound. A voice. The quality of it was extraordinary. It penetrated the static like a finger going through silk, smooth, certain. The voice of someone who had spent 20 years being the most dangerous thing in every room. Children, the Dark Queen said, and the word was not dismissive but surgical. You did well. Better than I expected, honestly, from a bird and 3 teenagers from a planet I'd never bothered to name. I respect it. I want you to know that. No one said anything. Morgan, she said. Morgan went very still. I know your name because I know everything about you. I've known about you since T-Bird's ship went down. I know that you've spent your entire life failing at things that almost mattered. I know that this, a pause, weighted precise, is the first time you've ever felt like yourself. The silence stretched. She's not wrong, Dave murmured very quietly. I know, Morgan said. I'm not asking you to surrender, the Queen continued. I'm asking you to consider what you're actually protecting. Princess from a dynasty that collapsed 20 years ago, carrying a key to weapons that should not exist, guarded by a professor whose best plan is to hide and wait. You have been handed a war you didn't start, a cause you were sprayed into, and a timeline that gives you 8 more hours before your strength gives out. A pause. Or you could put the girl and her amulet outside, and I will leave your planet alone. Not because you're insignificant, because I'm choosing to. Morgan looked at the door. Behind it, Angelica was listening. She'll keep that promise, Bird said softly. She doesn't make offers she intends to break. It costs her too much strategically, so she'll leave Earth alone. Yes, and take the archive. Yes, and win her war. Eventually, yes. Morgan knocked twice on the door. Angelica opened it. She had heard everything. It's your call, he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were extraordinary up close. The kind of eyes that had spent 3 years watching things end and had not yet stopped believing in what came after. No, she said. It's ours. I'm a stranger. You flipped a Buick for someone you'd never met, she said. Because a waitress was tired. I watched you do it. She shook her head. You're not a stranger. Morgan turned to the room. Dave. She's coming herself for the third wave. How do you know? Because she gave us a speech. You give a speech when you're already moving. He looked at T-Bird. The building's roof, what's it made of? T-Bird blinked. Reinforced concrete, 12 inches. Why? Because she'll come from above. The first 2 waves came from ground level. She knows we can handle ground level. She wants to see it herself. Dave was already moving. What's the plan? George asked. There isn't one, Morgan said. There's an objective, which is keep her in the building long enough for T. Bird's signal to go through. And if she's better than us, she will be. George thought about this. He finished what he was eating. Okay, he said. She came through the roof. Not through a hole she'd cut, but through the roof itself. She hit it from above at speed, and she came down through it like something that had decided the concept of walls was a suggestion. The room she arrived in was the room they had been in, and she landed and stood and looked at the 3 of them. She was tall. She wore black. Armor and bodysuit in the same matte black that ate light rather than reflected it. Her face was human in its architecture and alien in its expression. Not because her features were wrong, but because the way they were arranged communicated something human faces mostly didn't. Absolute certainty. Not cruelty. Not contempt. Certainty. The expression of someone who had looked at every possible outcome and found them all acceptable. You stayed, she said, and something in her voice was genuinely surprised. We stayed, Morgan said. I told you the truth. I know. Then why? Morgan had been thinking about this since the voice had come through the speaker, since she had said his name. He had been turning it over the way the princess had turned over the amulet, looking for what it reflected back. Because you were also right about something else, he said. She waited. This is the first time I've felt like myself, he said. But it's not because of the transformation. It's because I stopped running away from the thing that was in front of me and turned around. He looked at her. You did the opposite. You had something worth fighting for, and you turned it into a reason to fight everyone. Something moved in her face. It was not agreement, but it was recognition, which was different, and for a person like her, harder. Then she moved. She was better than them. This was not a story where the underdogs were secretly the strongest. She was faster, more trained, and she had spent 2 decades fighting things considerably more dangerous than 3 teenagers and a bird. Dave's speed barely kept pace. George's mass barely slowed her. Morgan took 3 hits that should have knocked him down and didn't, purely because the serum was doing something to his nervous system that human physiology had no language for. But she had to fight all 3 of them. That was the variable she hadn't fully accounted for, not their individual strength. The coordination, the way they had been fighting together since the diner, learning each other's blind spots, covering each other without discussing it. George had fought with Morgan and Dave every day of high school. Not physically, just through life. He knew how they moved. He knew what Morgan did when he was about to do something reckless. He knew Dave's tell when he found the angle. 6 minutes into the fight, T-Bird's signal went through. Morgan knew because T-Bird said, very quietly over the comm, "Response incoming." 7 minutes. 7 minutes. The Queen was not losing. She was controlling the fight, but she was not winning quickly, and she had to know why. He could see her recalculating. "You have a retrieval incoming," he said between exchanges. "You know it." "Irrelevant," she said. "I'll be gone in 5. Not if we make it 6, she paused. Just a fraction. The pause of someone encountering a logic they had not considered. "Why do you care about other worlds?" she said. "You barely knew yours mattered." "I know it now," he said. She hit him. It was one of the hardest hits he'd ever taken, and it put him through a wall and into the room next to the room, and he lay in the plaster dust, looking at the ceiling, and thought, "This is the part where I get up." He got up, not because he was supposed to, not because the serum required it, because the waitress had been tired, and someone had knocked over the coffee, and there had been something in that specific exhaustion that he recognized and had always recognized, the weight of being in the world without enough help, and he was tired of standing near that weight and doing nothing. He walked back through the hole in the wall. The Queen was looking at the door where Angelica stood. The princess had come out. She was holding the amulet in both hands, extended, and her face had the expression of someone who had made a decision that has been forming for 3 years, and finally finished forming. "Take it," Angelica said. The Queen went very still. "Take it," Angelica said again. "I'll give it to you right now." "What are you doing?" Morgan said. "Negotiating," she said without looking at him. The Queen took a single step forward. "T-Bird," Angelica said. "How long since you sent the signal?" 4 minutes, 12 seconds, T-Bird said. "And the patrol arrives in 7 from signal, so 3 minutes, approximately." "Here's the negotiation," Angelica said to the Queen. "I give you the amulet. You take it, and you go, and you never touch Earth or its people, and you leave the 3 of them alone. And in 3 minutes, the Allied patrol arrives, and you have the amulet, and there's nothing they can do about it." "You'd give up the archive," the Queen said. "I'd give it up rather than watch people die for it." She met the Queen's eyes. "The archive isn't the prize. What you do with it is. And I've been running for 3 years betting that I could find a different answer." "I don't have a different answer." Something steady in her voice. "But you do. You started this because you were imprisoned for a discovery that threatened powerful people. That's not nothing. That's real. What you built to survive it is." She stopped. "It's what fear builds. And I can't fight fear with a key." The room was very quiet. The Queen looked at the amulet. She looked at Angelica. She looked at Morgan, still covered in plaster dust, standing in the hole he'd made in the wall, absolutely immovable. "You would have died," the Queen said. "All 3 of you would have died before you let me have it." "Yes," Morgan said. "For a world you just started caring about. For a waitress who was tired," he said. "And everyone like her." Something in the Queen's face shifted. It was not softening. She was not a person who softened at a cellular level, but it was a reorientation. A scientist encountering a data set that complicated the model. She turned and walked to the gap in the roof. "The amulet stays with the princess," she said, without turning around. "I don't want a weapon that was handed to me." She stopped. "There are other archives. Better ones. I'll find a different path." She went up through the roof. The building was quiet. Morgan sat down on the floor. Dave sat down next to him. George sat down and immediately began eating something he had apparently been carrying through the entire fight. Angelica was still holding the amulet. She lowered her hand slowly. "Did that work?" Dave asked. "I don't know," she said. T-Bird was checking his device. "Her ship has broken orbit," he said. "She's gone." The Allied patrol arrived 9 minutes later, slightly late, because of navigational variance T. Bird diplomatically declined to elaborate on. and found 3 enormous green toads, a princess, and a bird sitting in a decommissioned aerospace facility drinking coffee that George had somehow produced. The debrief was long and formal, and involved several species Morgan had never seen before asking very pointed questions about the status of the amulet and the whereabouts of the queen. Morgan answered the questions. Angelica answered more of them. Bird answered the rest with the careful precision of someone accustomed to being questioned by committees. At some point, near the end, one of the patrol officers, a thin, gray-skinned being with eyes that moved independently, looked at the 3 of them and said, in the careful translation-accented English that the Universal Comms produced, "You are from this planet?" "Yes," Morgan said. "And you were not soldiers before this?" "We were students," George said. "I played basketball badly." The officer looked at them for a long time. "Your world," he said finally, "is not in our patrol area. We did not know anything lived here worth protecting." "Yeah," Morgan said. "We get that a lot." Reversal was offered again that night in the parking lot of the Chevron. T-Bird laid it out with the same directness he'd used when he explained the serum. The choice was real. They could be human again by morning. Green gone. Smash hits gone. The whole strange new architecture of themselves. They stood in the parking lot and looked at the sky for a while. "She might come back," Dave said. "She might," T-Bird agreed, "or someone else might." "This sector of space is very large," T-Bird said, "and Earth has been invisible to it for a long time. That visibility may not be easily reversed." Morgan thought about what the patrol officer had said, about the patrol area, about the invisible planet full of invisible people who had never given anyone a reason to protect them, and who had, in the course of one Tuesday, produced 3 individuals who had held a building against the most dangerous woman in 4-star systems for 37 minutes, and then watched her leave without the thing she came for. He looked at his hands. Green, still green. "Gerald's probably still upset about his Buick," he said. "Almost certainly," T-Bird agreed. "We should pay for that." "With what funds?" Morgan looked at Angelica. Angelica looked at him. "We'll figure something out," he said. He didn't take the reversal. Neither did Dave. George had already walked back inside to get more coffee, and the question had therefore answered itself. Bird made a sound that in bird language apparently meant something between resignation and pride, and is very difficult to translate. The night was clear. The coast highway ran between the city and the ocean was doing what oceans do, which is continue regardless. Morgan stood on the edge of the parking lot and looked at both of them. The city with its ordinary lights, the ocean with its ordinary dark, and felt for the first time that he was standing in the right place for the right reasons. He thought about the queen and her fear and the terrible, patient thing she had built from it. He thought about Angelica holding the amulet out with both hands, offering the thing she'd run 3 years to protect, because she understood that what you protect matters less than why you protect it. He thought about the diner and the waitress and the exact cadence of that sentence, not angry, just tired, and how that had been the moment everything started, not when the ship came down, but when he turned toward something instead of away from it. He went inside. The Chevron was fluorescent and smelled like coffee and floor cleaner, and somewhere a radio was playing a song from 3 summers ago that made him think of nothing particular and everything at once. Dave was explaining the situation to a bewildered cashier. George was standing at the hot dog roller with the expression of a man who has found his purpose. Morgan walked to the coffee machine. He poured a cup. He looked at his green hands around the white cup. Outside, in the parking lot, T-Bird was uploading the day's events to whatever archive kept track of these things. Angelica was asleep in the car, the amulet at her throat, her face calm in a way it probably hadn't been in years. In high orbit, somewhere above the clouds, the Allied patrol was writing a report about an unregistered inhabited world that had, apparently, been protecting itself without anyone's help for quite some time. Morgan drank his coffee. The cashier said to Dave, "Are you guys some kind of superheroes?" Dave thought about it. "Statistically, not historically," he said. Morgan smiled. The night continued, ordinary and enormous, the way nights do when everything has changed and the world doesn't know it yet.